Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Dominica Canor and I'm here with Faith Gancro and Julie Radwan. Today we're going to talk about something that is usually overlooked in early American history, the role of women in Jamestown. When most people think of Jamestown, they picture an all-male settlers, Captain John Smith, maybe some tobacco farming, but not a lot of focus goes towards women. And that's what we wanted to explore, how women actually helped shape the colony and played a huge part in its survival and growth. So having said that, let's get into it and take a closer look at women in Jamestown. Jamestown is often remembered as the beginning of English America. It was established in 1607 and became the first permanent English settlement in what is now known as the United States. Before Jamestown, English colonization efforts like the mysterious Roanoke colony had failed, but this time, the settlers held on. It is important to know that Jamestown was initially an all-male settlement. Over 100 men came with the hope of finding wealth, land, and opportunity. But without women, the early colony was little more than a military-style outpost, one that struggled to maintain itself. The area was known as Virginia, named after Queen Elizabeth I, which was also called the Virgin Queen. And this name reflected both her status and England's ambitions for this new territory. As for the Jamestown expedition, it wasn't launched by the Crown itself, but by a private business, the Virginia Company in London. It was a joint stock company, meaning that investors pooled money together to fund colonial ventures, hoping for profitable returns through new trade routes and valuable resources. The settlement was named Jamestown in honor of King James I of England, who had granted the company's charter. The enterprise was not just about exploration, it was about commerce, wealth, and expansion. However, as the company then realized, building a successful, lasting colony would require more than economic investment. It would also need people willing to settle permanently, and that meant bringing over women to create real communities. So the first woman didn't arrive in Jamestown until 1608, a year after the settlement was founded. But it wasn't 11 years later that larger groups of women were actively recruited by the Virginia Company to cross the Atlantic. These women were often referred to as maids for wives, a term used in company documents that reflected their intended role, to marry the settlers and help form stable households. The presence of women brought much-needed social structure and stability to Jamestown. They played a critical role in transforming the colony into a functioning society, rather than a temporary camp for future seekers. Their arrival also encouraged many men to stay, plant roots, and build lives rather than returning home to England. In this way, the women were central not only to the social development of the colony, but also to its economic growth and long-term survival. Life in Jamestown was harsh, and the roles of women were demanding and diverse. Their work was crucial to keeping the settlement running. One of their primary roles was agricultural labor. They helped tend gardens, grow food, and preserve crops, all of which were vital to feeding the community. They also carried domestic duties such as cooking, cleaning, sewing, and maintaining the home. Although these tasks may seem like routine today, in the wilderness of early colony Virginia, they were critical for health and survival. Homes were rudimentary, food was scarce, and illness was common. Keeping a household functioning was a monumental task. In addition, women helped raise children, support their families, and often helped run family farms along their husbands. In every sense, they were foundational to the daily operations and long-term stability of the colony. Perhaps the most significant contribution of women in Jamestown was their role in helping the colony survive. Their presence brought a sense of permanence and order, moving the settlement from a military-style camp to a more traditional society. They endured harsh conditions, including disease outbreaks, food shortages, and severe weather just like the men. But instead of fleeing or giving up, they contributed through labor, caregiving, and perseverance. Women helped keep families together, which in turn strengthened the community. Their resilience helped anchor Jamestown through its most difficult years. One of those difficult years were the surviving time, which lasted for about a year. It was a tragic period in which the settlers experienced extreme food shortages. This was due to a mix of poor harvests, drought, disease, and conflict with indigenous groups, all of which were cut off in essential resources. During this time, the colony's population plummeted, from nearly 500 to just about 60 survivors. And yet, the women still played a crucial role. They preserved what little food they could, using traditional preservation techniques, and nursed the sick and dying, often to a great personal risk. While their contributions during this period are not as well documented as those of military leaders and company officials, they were vital behind the scenes and doing the work that allowed others to make it through. A special mention is Pocahontas. No story of early Jamestown would be complete without Pocahontas, a remarkable young woman from the Powhatan people. She was born around 1596 and was the daughter of Chief Powhatan, the powerful leader of a large indigenous confederacy in the region. She met the English settlers, most notably Captain John Smith, shortly after they arrived. According to Smith's later accounts, Pocahontas intervened to save his life when he was captured by her people, although some historians now debate the accuracy of it. What is clear is that she played a vital diplomatic role, often acting as a liaison between the English and the Powhatan people during times of tension and misunderstanding. In 1613, Pocahontas was captured by the English during a military conflict. During her captivity, she converted to Christianity, took the name Rebecca, and eventually married John Rolfe, an English tobacco planter. This marriage led to a brief period of peace between the two groups, often called the Peace of Pocahontas. Over time, Pocahontas became a symbol, especially in England, of the success of colonization, used to justify English expansion. But behind the myth is a real woman who was caught between two worlds and underwent profound personal and cultural upheaval.
This is Julia Radwan, and I will be comparing England to Jamestown, more specifically, the women. To begin, in England, women were working, but they were facing a wage gap. So, although they were working, they were receiving about a half to 1/3 of the wages that men were, which could be seen as purposefully so that women had to rely on their husbands. The low wages were rooted by inferiority, and this could be how women were seen, so politically, physically, intellectually. In addition to this, they weren't given legal identity, so they couldn't own anything. They were basically under their father or their husband. And they technically did not exist, but I will get into that in the next slide. In Jamestown, women were making bigger impacts in their society because women were needed. It was said that women provided the stability needed for Jamestown's survival. Jamestown needed women in order for the colony to flourish. They brought so many skills, and they also could repopulate the colony in order for it to have a chance to even be permanent. In addition to this, they were also gaining more rights, so they could choose their husbands. They were more involved in politics and society, and they could inherit things. So for getting more rights, it is said that women were taught to be homemakers as their whole occupation. But many wanted to be involved outside of the home, and those with money had more of a chance to do so. So this could be considered elite women who had access to the public sphere and new opportunities to influence public life. Also, this was more accepted than in England, that women could choose their husbands and own things after death of their husband or their father. So an example are inheritances, maybe of land. And I believe it is important to add that in Jamestown and England, there were hunger present in both societies. Next is marriage and rights of both England and Jamestown. So to begin, on the right are two pictures. The top one is kind of emphasizing how important tobacco was in Virginia, and this has to do with the tobacco brides. At the bottom is a picture of the tobacco brides coming to Jamestown after possibly seeing ads posted in England. So, for the tobacco brides, Jamestown needed women to repopulate and to bring their skills there so badly that they had to come up with an idea to bring the women. So, in effort to do so, they promised the women that if they came to Jamestown and married a man, that they would not only receive tobacco, which could be 120 to 150 pounds, but they could also receive other items like clothing and even land. So this was not as common as the opportunities that women in England had. And also there were some advantages. So it gave the women more rights. So they could choose their husband, which, as I mentioned, is not as normal in England. They also had a hard life at home, potentially, with starvation. So this new life might not have been a bad option, and it could have given them an opportunity at a better life. And to conclude, the ads posted in England for this opportunity brought about 150 women to Jamestown. In both Jamestown and in England, there were the doctrine of coverture. but it was way more strict in England, most likely because they needed the women in Jamestown. So under this, women basically did not exist at all. When a woman was born, they only existed under their father, and then when they got married, they existed under their husband. They basically were covered by men, and they didn't have the identity. This means that a woman could not own anything. They couldn't be sued. They couldn't make contracts. They could not usually work in a business. They definitely could not own a business. And they also could not own pieces of clothing. They technically weren't theirs, and they didn't have rights to their own children. But the one thing that kind of differs is also typically inheritance. So if a husband died in Jamestown, a woman, a wife, usually took over, whether it was like... So to conclude, Jamestown faced many struggles. We mentioned starvation and sicknesses, many deaths. Also, trying to get women to come to Jamestown with uncertainty. All women made an admirable impact on the development. It wasn't just white women, as many sources bring up. Even though white women did make an impact, we can think about people like Pocahontas, who made a severe impact and who put a lot of effort into bringing early settlers food to try to help them survive. Lastly, women in England and Jamestown had different lives and rights, and this was shown previously, where women had more rights in Jamestown because they needed them, versus in England, where they were more covered by men. Additionally, women were becoming more involved in politics and society. So, to the right, I have the letter Abigail Adams sent to her husband, which is the Remember the Ladies. And although it does not directly correlate to Jamestown, the reason that I included this is to reflect on how women in many colonies had to fight for their rights, especially against men. And the development of women's rights could be reflected in this and with this presentation. To conclude, our understanding of this has grown where we did not know the exact impacts women had on making this colony permanent. I think throughout the entire presentation we have stressed that topic, and we hope that the examples that we have included, such as Pocahontas, the Tobacco Brides, have helped your understanding as well. So we thank you.